Okay, can you hear me now? Hold on.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Good. Very good, very good. Sorry, guys. This is a little clunky. Alrighty. So, what I was saying was that our topic tonight is we are talking about the detransitioning community. And the reason why I felt like that was an important topic to talk about is that they don't really get much shine when it comes to the trans community. But wait, let me just rewind a little. First of all, thank you guys for being here. I'm RnBBae, of course. And yeah, so they don't really get much shine when it comes to the trans community. And when they do speak out, somebody who has fully transitioned and decides to go back, they're kind of bullied into silence. So tonight is their time to shine on my page. So let me get the screen sharing going again. So right now, as it stands, within the trans community, when it comes to detransitioning, their statistic is that they don't talk about it because it's less than 1% of people who choose to detransition, which is false. And that is what I am going to show you here tonight. Okay. Okay. Sorry, guys, bear with me for 1 second. This thing is making me dizzy. Okay, so I am going to start off going over this article that talks about it is a doctor from his perspective talking about why he originally didn't think that. He talks about why he didn't think that detransitioning was an important topic to discuss or to follow at all from his own bias. If I could get it to open, that would help so much. It's probably open already. Okay. So the title is Why Detransitioners Are Crucial to the Science of Gender Care. And understanding the reason some trans people quit treatment is key to improving it, especially for the rising number of minors seeking to medically transition, experts say. But many researchers, detransitioning and regret have long been untouchable subjects. For years, Dr. Kenan McKinnon, like many people in the transgender community, considered the word regret to be taboo. McKinnon, a 37-year-old transgender man and assistant professor of social work at York University here, thought it was offensive to talk about people who transitioned, later regretting their decision and detransitioned. They were too few in number, he figured, and any attention they got reinforced to the public the false impression that transgender people were incapable of making sound decisions about their treatment. This doesn't even really happen, McKinnon recalled thinking as he listened to an academic presentation on detransitioners in 2017. We're not supposed to be talking about this. McKinnon, whose academic career has focused on sexual and gender Minority Health assumed that nearly everyone who detransitioned did so because they lacked family support or couldn't bear the discrimination and hostility they encountered. Nothing to do with their own regret. To learn more about this group for a new study, he started interviewing people. In the past year, McKinnon and his team of researchers have talked to 40 detransitioners in the United States, Canada, and Europe, many of them having first received gender-affirming medical treatment in their 20s or younger. Their stories have appended his assumptions. Many have said their gender identity remained fluid well after the start of treatment. And a third of them expressed regret about their decision to transition from the gender they were assigned at birth. Some of them said they avoided telling their doctors about detransitioning out of embarrassment or shame. Others said their doctors were ill-equipped to help them with the process. Most often, they talked about how transitioning did not address their mental health problems. So this is the crux of the problem, is that they are treating a mental disorder with a physical, option. They're using surgery to treat a mental disorder. So if I go into a doctor and I tell them that I'm depressed or that I have anxiety, they're not going to recommend any type of surgery to fix that. And just like any other mental disorder, what we need is a psychologist. What we need is a therapist. What we need is to work through what the issues are that are making us feel this way, as opposed to going under the knife to fix that. There's plenty of people out there who were born brunette and want to be blonde. And what do they do in order to, make themselves feel better about that? They don't pull out all their hair follicles and insert blonde hair follicles. They dye their hair, So there is still going, oh God. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm a little socially awkward, so please bear with me. Okay, so back to this. So the point I was making is that, this gender dysphoria is the diagnosis that is used for the reason that, we give patients quote unquote gender affirming care. However, gender dysphoria, that diagnosis is a mental disorder, and that's the problem. Gender dysphoria is a mental diagnosis. And that's the problem, is that we can't solve a mental problem with a physical fix. And I lost my page again. All right, guys, I swear I'm gonna get my life together at some point. This one, but it doesn't want to open. Okay. Okay. In his continuing search for detransitioners, McKinnon spent hours scrolling through TikTok and sifting through online forums where people shared their experiences and found comfort from each other. These forays opened his eyes to the online abuse detransitioners received, not just the usual anti-gender not just the not just the usual anti-transgender attacks, but members of the trans community telling them to shut up and even sending death threats, which is interesting because that community, the trans community, always talks about how they are victims and, how they are unable to be themselves and they just want equal rights and to be treated like everyone else. And then as soon as someone within their community has the gall to go against what they are toting and what they're pushing, they literally flip it around on them and start to treat them exactly how they exclaim that they're being treated. So it kind of makes it seem like their community is more of a cult than a community. The moment that you disagree, you have to be threatened, you have to be shut up until you stop talking because what you're saying goes against their narrative. I can't think of any other examples where you're not allowed to speak about your own healthcare experiences if you didn't have a good outcome. McKinnon told Reuters. The stories he heard convinced him that doctors need to provide detransitioners the same supportive care they give to young people to transition, and that they need to inform their patients, especially minors, that detransitioning can occur because gender identity may change. A few months ago, he decided to organize a symposium to share his feelings and find new perspectives with other researchers, clinicians, and patients and their families. And that part I wholeheartedly agree with. And I think anyone with, a brain would agree that children who are gender dysphoric and feel like they want to transition should be informed of the possibility of their gender identity changing. They're still young, they still have time to grow, and anything can happen. For me, even for an example, when I was young, I was a tomboy. I was a huge tomboy. And I didn't want anything to do with anything girly. I would wear baggy clothes. And at the time, I was curious about what it was like to be a boy. And I think mostly because I had always been a girl. And at that time in my life, if somebody had asked me if I wanted to be a boy, I probably would have said yes. And I was like, at the time, that was like 9 through maybe 13, 12, 13. And had someone asked me, I would have been like, yeah, why not? I saw my older brothers, they got all the privileges, they got to do all the stuff I couldn't do. So it was like, yeah. And I can't even imagine. Now, the person that I am, I can't even imagine had I made that decision then. I would regret it. I would look back now and I would be very depressed about, the choices that I made at such a young age. And I would be curious as to why the people in my life at the time allowed that to happen. And I think that's exactly what a lot of these young people who are now kind of coming out of the fog of the transgender community, of that community, now the people that are coming out of it and realizing that they really do identify with the gender that they were born in. But the sad part is that they can't get the aid that they need because the community that they thought were full of people that love them now is shunning them. The doctors that helped them to get to this phase, helped them to chop off body parts and everything to quote unquote affirm their gender, they won't help them to now detransition. They won't give them options as to how they can start to reverse the process that, they were helped into. So I want to show you a video. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to stop this for a second while I find it. But can you imagine going to a doctor and having, having something done, and then going home and realizing that you're not happy with your result? And when you try to complain, when you try to go to the doctor and tell them, hey, you messed up, or, I'm not happy and I need your help to figure out how how I can, get back to some semblance of normalcy. And they don't answer your phone calls, or they tell you that they can't help you. And now you're kind of on your own. And when you were on the other side of it, these people were gung-ho and more than willing to help you down that road. Sorry, guys, I keep pausing. Right, citizen man, they get coaxed into it. They get love bombed. They get, so much positive attention from this community that wants them to, join their ranks, I guess, that they're not even in any type of logical thought at that point. They kind of get stuck on autopilot. I think that I lost the video that I wanted to show you guys. So I am going to, oh, right. That's why. I got to show you guys this one from my phone. Okay, so let me just get that up really quick. All right, I'm going to skip it. It's going to take me too long. I thought I had it queued up, but I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and keep reading that article, and then I have another video I want to show you guys. Okay, I forgot I stopped sharing my screen. I am so sorry, but thank you guys for your patience. I swear I will get it together. Okay. Here we go. Nope. Okay. Not everyone was willing to join the discussion. A Canadian healthcare provider said it couldn't participate, citing recent threats to hospitals offering youth gender care. An LGBTQ advocacy group refused to promote the event. McKinnon declined to identify either, telling Reuters he didn't want to single them out. Later, after he shared his findings on Twitter, a trans person denounced his work as transphobia. And that is their favorite way to go. As soon as somebody questions them or says something that isn't in line with their thought process, it's transphobic, it's hate, and that I find to be mind-boggling also, because it's like, again, I feel like their community is a cult. And if you don't agree with what they're saying, you get excommunicated and threatened. He expected his research would be a hard sell, even to many of the 100 or so people from Canada, the United States, and elsewhere who accepted his invitation. I need your help, he told the crowd that assembled in November in a York University conference room. For the day-long session, my perspectives have changed significantly. But I recognize that for many of you, you may find yourselves feeling much like I did back in 2017, challenged, apprehensive, maybe fearful. Fighting words. And that's the best way to put it. Because again, fighting words to them is anything that disagrees with their line of thinking. In the world of gender-affirming care, as well as the broader transgender communities, few words cause more discomfort and outright anger than detransition and regret. That's particularly true among medical practitioners in the United States and other countries who provide treatment to rising numbers of minors seeking to transition. And that's kind of why my title was Regret is Not Rare, because that's one thing that community likes to say all the time, is that it's rare. It's such a small, it's such a small group of people. There's no point in even talking about it, but it's not rare. It's just that they bully people into silence, so we don't hear about it very often. They insist, as McKinnon once did, that detransitioning is too rare, like I just said, to warrant much attention, citing their own experiences with patients and extant research to support their view. When someone does detransition, they say, it's almost never because of regret, but rather a response to the hardship of living in a society where transphobia still runs rampant. False. These patients are not returning in droves to detransition, said Dr. Marcy Bowers, a transgender woman, gender surgeon, and president of the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, an international group that set guidelines for trans care. Patients with regret are very rare, she told Reuters. Highest you'll find is 1 or 1.5% of any kind of regret. Doctors and many transgender, goodness, I keep saying it. It is what it is. People say that focusing on isolated cases of detransitioning and regret endangers hard-won gains for broader recognition of trans identity and rapid increase in the ability of gender care that has helped thousands of minors. They argue that as youth gender care has become a highly polarized in the United States and other countries, opponents of that care are able to weaponize rare cases of detransition in their efforts to limit or end it altogether. Major medical groups deem it safe and potentially life-saving. So they don't want to hear about people who are having a hard time with it because it goes against their narrative. It's going to maybe even shy people away who might have been on the bandwagon to get some quote unquote gender affirming care. They might second think it, or their parents might put their foot down and say, all these people are coming out years later saying that they regret doing this. Maybe I should give my kid a couple more years before we do that. I'm not saying no, I'm just saying not now. Maybe people will be a little bit more informed when they make these decisions as opposed to just going along with it because that's the narrative. Most cases for people who do go along with gender affirming care, it's after 1 to 3 sessions on average. So, and you'll see it in a few of these videos. I'm going to show you a few people who choose to detransition, and you'll hear it in their stories. But the theme is kind of there wasn't much investigation, there wasn't much education to the patient or the parents as to what to expect or what they were actually signing up for. And these are kids, you have to remember, most of the time. They like to try to get them before they go through puberty because they say, it's easier for them to kind of, get into that gender more seamlessly. But these are children, and not only are they confusing the kids who don't really know what's going on, they're also threatening and using fear tactics on the parents. Most of the time, what they tell them is your choices are either allow your child to affirm their gender or they're going to kill themselves. What parent is going to choose the former? What parent's going to choose the latter? I said that wrong. What parent is going to say, we're not going to affirm your gender. We'll just risk you going ahead and offing yourself. Yeah. I mean, I think the choice is pretty clear when you break it down like that. Okay. So I am going to show you guys a video. It is going to be this one. So this is a few people talking about their want to go back. They transitioned and they wish they hadn't. Oh, let me know if you guys can hear it because, sound is like the devil right now. Probably not. Can you guys hear it? No sound. That's what I thought. Okay. Okay. So I think I might have to. No, I'm not going to do that. I lied. Where am I going? This one. Yep, that ain't it. Let me try stopping it and then starting it again. Did I share sound when I started? Let's see. Try that again. Yeah. Wait. Share screen. But it's not. Oh, there it is. Share sound. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. I think I got it. Let's try that again.
Male. I started living as a female when I was 19 years old, had a sex change when I was 30 years old. I've now been living as a woman for 28 years, and I fully regret this.
Nobody can change genders. It's impossible. It's delusional. It's a mental illness.
Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man.
Once I finally had the surgery, I went, oh, this was the wrong thing to do. It was the wrong thing to do to cut off my male anatomy.
The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh."
The fact of the matter is that 40% of people who are attempting suicide are people who regret ever changing genders.
Lift off, Dr. I set my alarm for right there around 4 o'clock to get up, but usually I wake up beforehand. It's as though God just wakes me up. I read the Bible, and then I pray, and then I try to be still and listen for His voice, His guidance. Hi, my name is Billy Burley. I'm living here in Lompoc in this house, and I used to work for NASA. Y'all come on in and let me show y'all around the house a little bit. So the weather over here in Lompoc is exceptional. We don't have air conditioning over here, and so we keep the doors and windows open for a good bit throughout the year. I was a skinny little introverted kid, had a speech impediment and tried to talk, but a lot of people didn't understand me. My body told me that I belong with the boys, but my thoughts, my mind was saying that I belonged with the girls. And I didn't know which way to go. Wanted to be like my sisters. I thought I should be like my sisters. And when my older sister started wearing makeup, I started playing with some of her makeup in the bathroom. And then in the 6th grade, when I was on the summer league swim team, and we had a new diving coach. Well, what he would do is, when he had a chance, he would play with me. He would fondle me and try to get me to have an erection and just continue to play with me. Carmelli, I'm going to have to shut you into a room. Can we pause for just a moment?
Yeah, sure.
Come on, Carmel. Let's get you into a room back here. You are going to keep moving around. Come on.
Quiet, bad dog, bad dog. Hold one moment. I will try to silence the dog. Dottie, go lay down. Go lay down. First off, my name is Renee Jacks, and I'm an author. I've written 8 books so far, 3 of them to do with transsexuality. I was born male, grew up in a very conservative Republican family. My father was pretty much absent most of my childhood. He was an alcoholic. My mother was mentally ill. The childhood was so troubled and so traumatic that in retrospect, I was able to look at it and realize that there was no way I was getting out of childhood normal. You go and you take a shower and you're there to get clean, but every time I had to take off my clothes, every time I went to bathe, there's no getting around the fact that I wasn't a girl, that I was a boy. And that really is the one memory that sticks out, is just how much I hated my penis. By the time I left high school, when I was 18, I was cross-dressing most of the time once I was away from school. And a couple years afterwards, I ended up in San Francisco, which had a very small gay community. And I had made the decision by the time I was about 20 to start living full-time as a girl. When you start dating people, and if you pass well enough, the whole purpose is, are you a transsexual or are you a woman? And in my mind, I was always a woman. I'm wanting to date, and I'm not telling the men that I'm dating that I have a penis. And so when they find out, they become violent. There were a couple instances where I was beaten very badly.
I'm Miro Georgievich. I'm a surgeon and urologist, and I'm a leader of Belgrade Center for Genital Reconstructive Urology. Our center is very well known, especially for transgender surgery, and we perform all types of transgender surgery, male to female, female to male, reduced surgery with possible complications, and one of the very actual now, reversal surgery in regretful after another way in transgender transformation. We try always to make a genitalia to be first very functional and then to be more acceptable in aesthetical view. If you discuss about male to female, our results are much better. Why? Because in one surgery, we create a completely normal female genitalia, and these persons usually can have sexual intercourse, can enjoy in sexual activity, according to our experience, more than 90%. Transgender surgery starts to be very popular for both persons and doctors, and you can find too many jokes on this field. Oh, I'm going to make my genitalia to be different like now, and I will be a very nice lady, or I will be a very strong man, or something like this. And after that, after some event like alcohol or drug abuse or something like this, you're awake from anesthesia with a new genitalia.
The main milestone was finding a doctor who would give me the hormones. If I get the hormones, female cross-sex hormones, my life will be perfect. And then you think, well, if I can only get my voice, get my male voice up here, then that'll make me, just happy. And then you think the next thing is, well, if I can get breast implants, that's all I need. It's never enough. And finally, if you've gone through the therapy and you can convince a doctor to start cutting on you, you go and you have a sex change. I had my sex change in 1990. And in the back of my mind, I thought it might be like all the other stuff I had done, but I was just hoping that that would make me feel complete.
So she said a couple of things there. She said that she had trouble finding a doctor, which is vastly different than now. Obviously, she transitioned, a couple years ago, so things were a little bit different. Now, of course, they have gender affirming care is so readily available, and there's not very much that you have to go through in order to find it. So unfortunately, that part is no longer true. It's a little too easy to find a doctor now. And then she said that she was hoping that this transition would make her feel complete, which is the most dangerous part. Like Citizen Man said, gender dysphoria is a form of self-hate. And the problem is that they're never taught to love themselves. They're never taught to, realize that this is who you are and learn to accept that. It's just they are able to complete the delusion by getting surgery to affirm that delusion. When unfortunately, one thing that's never really mentioned is, let me just make sure you guys can hear me because obviously my sound is not cooperating tonight. Okay. One thing that's never really mentioned is the fact that gender is a part of your genetic code. And obviously, that's not something that you can ever change. You can't think yourself out of your genetic code. This is literally the ingredients that make you who you are. So yeah, it's shown on the outside, and it's something that the world can also perceive based on how you look. But it's also a part of your genetic code. So no matter what you do on the outside, that's never going to change. And that is why people who feel like they want to change their outside should be in therapy. They should be having some type of intervention in order to help them to realize that this is who you are and you just simply have to accept that.
I don't want to get in there. So why would you tell your neighbor that you did something that was so stupid? It's absolutely ridiculous to tell a neighbor, hey, I was a transgender and I've detransitioned. Pretty embarrassing to go through a gender change, to be that stupid, to believe that you can actually change genders. You got to be pretty ill-equipped to handle the truth. I was born in Los Angeles to a good family, good people. I was taken to my grandmother's house quite frequently as my parents liked to go away on the weekend. They liked to camp and fish. I somehow became interested at my grandma's house in cross-dressing, and I had mentioned something to her about that. So she decided to make me a purple dress and allow me to put it on and wear the dress. I finally got so interested and excited about wearing the dress that I got tired of waiting till I was going to go to Grandma's house to secretly cross-dress. So I snuck the dress home. Well, my mom found the dress. And so then Dad got upset. I was never allowed to go to Grandma's house again. The first step was I changed my name secretly when I was about 13 years old to Crystal. Probably in my late 20s, I started to talk to doctors about hormone therapy. And I began to take hormone therapy. 35 years ago, there wasn't much information. And we concluded that based on everything that was available at the time, that undergoing hormone therapy, further hormone therapy, and gender reassignment surgery would be the answer to resolve this, quote, gender identity disorder. That's when in April of 1983, I underwent the gender reassignment surgery by Dr. Biber in Trinidad, Colorado. It was amazing. I felt like the world had been lifted from my shoulders, and it was all really wonderful. The only thing I don't know is, was it all the medication from 5 hours of surgery that made me feel this way, or was it because I'd gone through the surgery? Because you're pretty heavily medicated. My female name at the time was Laura Jensen.
Lompoc is a nice town. It's quiet and it's small. I was a little bit apprehensive going into surgery, but also a little excited too. Finally, we're at this point. And after going into surgery and then coming out of surgery and being in the elevator, I asked somebody, "Is it gone?" And they assured me that it was gone. And I was very relieved. I was losing a lot of blood through the surgical site. What they did was kept putting gauze into my new vagina, but I was excited. I was excited that finally this is done. This is now behind me. So now I'm starting my new life.
I never had the full ability to have intercourse because the vagina that they make is so small. So anytime I tried to have intercourse, it was extremely painful and it wouldn't happen. So these surgeries are nothing more than plastic surgery. They don't create, the phalluses that they create for female to males are really hideous looking. I've had several female to male friends, and you look at it and you just go, oh God, you paid for that. It's horrible. The sex change didn't solve my discomfort. The doctors who are honest will say that the gender dysphoria is always there. And it's because the confusion is, it's not so much, it starts out being about your anatomy, but really what it's, you don't like yourself.
And I don't know if y'all heard that, but I'm just going to reiterate. She said that the sex change didn't solve her discomfort, and that any doctor who's honest will tell you that the dysphoria doesn't go away. And that's exactly what, what I've already been talking about this whole time, is that we're trying to solve a mental problem with a physical fix. And she also expressed that she was upset that her new vagina was unusable, that it was just basically there for show. And that she had seen some women to men transitions who also were, horrible. I just don't really understand how, what exactly do they expect? Your body wasn't made to be this gender. So do you expect to have whatever sexual organ that's similar to a person who was born that way? I'm not really sure, but again, this is why we should be solving this problem with mental health and with therapy, as opposed to trying to chop things off and flip it inside out and make it into what it shouldn't be. All right. It's a little lengthy, but it's good. Just hold on for me, guys.
Being a freak in society, being, I call it in my book, a social pariah, is not the way you want to live. The isolation drives you to despair. And so, yeah, suicide is a big, big thing.
Maybe you can remember exact day when you thought about committing suicide, and how did you stop yourself?
Yesterday, I don't know. The first time was right before the surgery in 1990. And the only thing that kept me from doing it, quite honest, is I'm a coward at heart.
Now, isn't that interesting that, as I said earlier, that's how they scare parents into affirming their children, is they tell them that if you don't go through with it, they're going to want to off themselves. And this person's testimony is telling us that she wanted to do it the whole time. And one thing that I've seen in my research was that people with this condition were either already having those thoughts of wanting to harm themselves, or those thoughts were heightened after they were affirmed, because they thought that doing the surgery and doing the, taking all the medication was going to help them, and it didn't. It didn't change anything. It just, made their voice deeper, or, now they had to live without their breast or their penis. But nothing on the inside was changed. So they're still having those negative thoughts. Or again, those negative thoughts are now heightened.
Just was so deeply disturbed at the time. I wanted to end my life, and somebody I knew had some cocaine, so I attempted to use it to kill myself. And it obviously didn't work, but my heart was pounding so hard after I took it that I thought it was going to come out of my chest.
And here again, he's talking about offing himself. And he did transition. Wasn't that supposed to solve all of his problems? And Citizen Man said, I honestly never thought we would see the day when we would have to debate what a woman is. Women have to get on the front lines of this fight because they are replacing them with mentally ill men. 1,000%. I agree with that 1,000%. Because, of course, as a woman, I'm very offended by how they are kind of shoving us natural born women into the corner and trying to take the spotlight and calling themselves women while they do it. And then we don't even get the title of women anymore. Now we are quote unquote cis women, which I hate. I absolutely hate that title because I never agreed to it. So how is it fair that somebody who is trans and, deciding to chop off his phallus in order to become a woman gets to call himself a woman and I am no longer a woman? That's crazy to me. That's crazy. And not only that, that person got to decide what their pronouns were. And should you violate what those pronouns are, you're transphobic and you're a bigot and all of this. But I never got to decide what mine is because mine damn sure ain't cis. Back to the video.
I feel safer having done that and not staying in one place very long where people might find out what I do and who I am. I don't want people to know that are around me. I don't want to be outed by the people around me. I was leaving church one day on Sunday 3-4 years ago now, and I got an email that said, I'm ready to commit suicide. Can you help me? And it was a transgender who had lived the transgender life for 2 or 3 years and was totally discouraged with it. I was actually exchanging information and talking with him on some level up to 5 times a day to keep him from committing suicide. He eventually restored his life. He detransitioned back. This is my entire office right here. My computer, my desk, my chair, my slippers, and this is where I sit and work. I don't need any more than this. Everything that I do is right here on the computer or on the phone talking to people. I've detransitioned now for 25 years, a little longer. And so it was when I detransitioned that everything began to make sense to me. And when I realized that how important it was to detransition to become psychologically, emotionally, and socially a healthy person, that I wanted others who wanted to detransition to have a way to come back to that same experience that I have. And if they have regret and want to detransition, I've built a website for them, sexchangeregret.com. How are you?
Doing good today. Doing good. How about you and KC?
Yeah, we're doing good. Billy contacted me by email like most people do, and we began to exchange information, and I talked to him on the phone. His story was just like mine. He was sexually abused I was sexually abused, and that was kind of the trigger point of changing genders.
Come on, kids. Come on.
Citizen Man said they don't even have to chop it off to be a woman. Right. That's the most egregious part. They get to keep it and still get called a woman. And I mean, I think you mentioned it on your show last night that there was a man in a woman's bathroom touching himself in the mirror, women walking in and out of the bathroom behind him, recording himself, all of that. And it's like nobody can say anything because he's a quote unquote woman in the woman's bathroom. And Jeff said they've been doing this for that long. Yep. The difference now is that they've ramped it up, that there's so much more access to quote unquote gender affirming care nowadays that you could walk outside and trip over a clinic that will do that. So that's the difference, is that it's like a deliberate push now. Whereas back then it was more, it was frowned upon, and obviously these people had to hide. And I think that's where the movement now gets their gas, where they feel like, they are so discriminated against and all this stuff, where if you really think about it, they're clearly not. They actually have way too much rope and access and all of that these days. So we're coming to the end here. Almost done.
Come on, come get your clothes on. Come on. Come on, buddy. 7 years after transitioning to a woman, I started thinking, okay, I've been doing this for 7 years now. My problems should have gone away by now, but they hadn't. And I actually had more problems at that point. Another problem is just trying to pass. I'm trying to do my hair just right, trying to do my makeup just right, trying to look just right to where people would not be uncomfortable, because you can see when people identify you as being transgender. I was like, this isn't life. Nothing has really changed. I'm still struggling. I was better off as I was before the surgery, before the hormone treatment. So it was at that point, 5 years after the surgery, thereabouts, that I started to have thoughts about changing back. That's my student ID from LSU. That's when I was swimming at LSU. I had a really big Adam's apple, heavy brow ridge, pretty big jaw. This is the ID after I had SRS surgery. And then when I was transitioning back to male in Louisiana, that's the driver's license I got. I had a lot of other pictures from that period, but one day when I was sitting in my office looking at the pictures of me back during this 7-year period, 7-8 years as being female, it was so discouraging that I wasted so much of my life in this particular period doing all of this, that just in the state that I was in, I erased all of the pictures that I had off of the computer and destroyed the pictures of me from that period to try to erase that period in my life. With God's help, I went through the change and I went back to being male. So I went through that surgery, and on the backside of it, I was in so much pain and so much discomfort, and regretted that surgery more than the first SRS surgery that I had. And then when he took the bandages off of my stomach to show me the skin graft, I was almost horrified at it. To me, it was gross. But it was by that surgery and the paperwork that the surgeon gave me saying when I had the surgery done initially, he gave me the paperwork that said, okay, I've been surgically changed to male.
I'm 60 years old.
Can you imagine? Not to get graphic, but can you imagine what his like genitals look like after all of that? Like he went from, obviously he was born a man, he had a sex change to be a woman, then he had another sex change to be a man again. Like, oh my goodness, it's like corned beef. Like I can't even. It's crazy to even imagine that somebody was just that distraught that they did all of this to their own body, you know? And he said that his trigger was sexual abuse, which obviously he never got help for. I'm sure he probably has at this point, I hope anyway. But that's what got him to even go down this road to begin with. And that's what happens to a lot of people who choose to go down this road, is that something traumatic like that happened to them and they want to dissociate themselves with that version, you know, that body that was violated in that way. And so they feel detached from their body, which is what the trans community says is the first telltale sign that you are gender dysphoric, which obviously wouldn't really be the case if you had some type of trauma cause you to feel like that.
There's no reason for me, after a lifetime of being in transition, to go and start living, dressing as a man anymore. There's no benefit in it. But there is a benefit in my standing before an audience of young kids in college who are considering this path and saying to them, okay, I'm the real deal. I started living as a woman when I was 20. I've lived 40 years of my life. I've had breast augmentation. I've had genital surgery. I've had 40 years of hormones. All of it has not made my life any better. It's never solved the problem. You break your left leg. You go into a doctor's office, and under the transsexual rule of medical treatment, they say, this is your new normal and we're gonna break your right leg too.
I think it's safe to say that when somebody has been cross-dressed and affirmed physically abused and sexually abused, that psychotherapy is the most needed therapy, not hormones and surgery.
When I met Rachel, I was already legally a man again. Hey, baby doll. How was your day? Her and her daughter came over to my house for a Fellowship of Christian Athletes meeting. And it was there that I first met her. And that was in 2010. And from there, I invited her for coffee.
And I didn't know what that meant. So I asked one of my classmates, what does that mean? One of my younger classmates. So she said, well, that's a safe way for asking for a date or trying to meet up with somebody.
I shared with her my past and what had happened and how I was. And at that time, she said, okay, let's be friends.
We shared the same interests, like what I was saying. We both like doing, especially swimming, but triathlons, we liked hiking. I don't know, I know he will say he remembers one time we went on a hike and we sat down for a rest and on a bench, and I kind of sat close to him and put my head on his shoulder.
And it was at that point I knew our relationship was changing, and that it was okay for me to start pursuing Rachel in a romantic way, and I did. Excellent. You're good. The intimacy between Rachel and me, with me being surgically altered, I cannot come to an orgasm. So Rachel and I, we enjoy intimacy.
Oh, isn't that wonderful, fresh air?
Fresh air is good. It is beautiful, and I'm praying for a little bit more rain, because if you notice up here, the green is starting to turn back to brown.
He asked me pretty soon, after a few months, if I'd marry him. And I think I thought about it for not too long, maybe a week or two, and responded yes. My older daughter said it probably best is they wanted me to be happy.
And I knew I was going to change back, but the big moment came when I was praying, and the Lord Jesus appeared to me as a vision in the prayer, as though I could touch him, just like I could touch anybody here. And he came and reached down to me with his hands and picked me up and said, "You're now safe with me forever." And it was at that moment that my life changed in a split second. Look at this, I'm healthy. Many of the people who've gone through this before me are dead. They're alcoholics. They're still struggling with their identity, and I'm alive and well and healthy and married for 21 years to my wife. That's redemption, restoration, and I'm helping other people. What other thing that's better in life when you're reaching out and helping other people with their life?
To you, babe. I love you.
And that's kind of their redemption. Now you don't want to stop.
Did you taste it?
It's kind of tough.
It is. But it's still pretty. It's still pretty tasty. I am so happy.
Goodness gracious. And that's kind of their redemption stories. It's a beautiful thing for them both, the two that transitioned back to male, to be able to find women and, be happy and be married. It's awesome. But unfortunately, that's not the case for all of them. Like the one guy said at the end, a lot of the people that he knows that went through that process, they off themselves, or they have a habit that they can't shake themselves of, or what have you, So unfortunately, it's not always a happy ending, but it is nice that they had one. But I think that it was interesting to see their side of their stories, because they transitioned way before, any time recently. I think they said like in the 90s that they transitioned, and I don't know what I did with that. And still the same, because even back then it wasn't as fast paced as it is now, where you get like 1 or 2 sessions, or talk to a doctor for 30 minutes and then get the drugs. It was definitely more, they made you jump through a bit more hoops, but it still clearly wasn't a perfect process, because you see people that did it and that lived with it for years and then ultimately weren't happy. So again, I don't really think there is any perfect process to trying to change your own genitals. But at least I would say they should be evaluated for at least a year before going into any type of hormone treatment or any type of surgical procedures. So now we're going to jump into another article. This one is called "I Literally Lost My Organs: Why Detransition Teens Regret Changing Their Genders." I was failed by the system. I literally lost organs. Chloe Cole, you guys might have heard of. She is, she's kind of been the voice of like the detransition movement. Sorry, hold on 1 second. Oh crap, not that one. Sorry guys, just give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Back to this article. Okay. So yeah, she's kind of the voice of the detransition movement. Well, I'm going to go into her story a bit now, and then you'll see her because I'm going to show you a video of her talking about what she went through also. So when Chloe was 12, she decided she was trans something. At 13, she came out to her parents the same year. I'm sorry, that same year, she was put on puberty blockers and prescribed testosterone. At 15, she underwent a double mastectomy, which, in case you don't know, is when you cut off both your breasts. Less than a year later, she realized she'd made a mistake, all by the time she was 16 years old. 16 years old. 16 was around the time when I was like, okay, I'm a girl. I got to commit to this girl lifestyle. I got to stop being a tomboy. And she had already irrevocably changed her body. Now 17, Chloe is one of a growing cohort called detransitioners, those who seek to reverse a gender transition, often after realizing they actually do identify with their biological sex. Tragically, many will struggle for the rest of their lives with the irreversible medical consequences of a decision they made as minors. I can't stay quiet, said Chloe. I need to do something about this and to share my own cautionary tale. And that's her. Beautiful little girl. And then that's her as a boy, obviously. In recent years, the number of children experiencing gender dysphoria in the West has skyrocketed. Exact figures are difficult to come by, but between 2009 and 2019, children being referred for transitioning treatment in the United Kingdom increased 1,000%. Sorry, you guys can't see that. Let me zoom in a little. 1,000%. It's freaking crazy among biological males, and for what 4,400% among biological females. Meanwhile, the number of young people identifying as trans in the US has almost doubled, according to a new Center for the Disease Control and Prevention report. Yeah, this whole Zoom thing is not a perfect science. Okay. Historically, transitioning from male to female was gender dysphoria from a very young age. Recently, however, the status quo has reversed, and female to male transition have become the overwhelming majority. Which honestly, that's a little hard for me to believe, but this article's from last year, so it's pretty recent, but just from what I see. Dr. Lisa Littman, a former professor of behavioral and social sciences at Brown University, coined the term rapid onset gender dysphoria. What? Rapid onset gender dysphoria. It looks like that's just a way for them to excuse the fact that they are pushing these kids into transitioning so quickly. To describe this subset of transgender youth, typically biological females who become suddenly dysphoric during or shortly after puberty. Littman believes this may be due to adolescent girls' susceptibility to peer influence on social media. I mean, that makes sense. And there she is again. Helena Kirshner, a 23-year-old detransitioner from Cincinnati, Ohio, who was born a biological female, first felt gender dysphoric at age 14. She says Tumblr sites filled with trans activities content spurred her transition. I was going through a period where I was really isolated at school, so I turned to the internet, she recalled. In her real life, Kirshner had a falling out with friends at school. Online, however, she found a community that welcomed her. My dysphoria was definitely triggered by this online community. I never thought about my gender or had a problem with being a girl before going on Tumblr. And that's why I believe that it's a deliberate push, because they are targeting kids who are too young to know what's happening and bombarding them with this information and convincing them that this is who they are. And then once they start to have those thoughts and start to entertain it, then they get love bombed by the trans community. And as soon as they come out and say, I am trans, it's like, yes, and you get championed for, and everybody's in your corner, and you now have all these friends, and, life is great. Until, of course, you start to question things, or you start to feel like maybe this was the wrong decision. Then they all turn their backs on you. There was a lot of negativity around being cis, heterosexual, white girl, and I took those messages really, really personally. It's almost like the whole quote unquote white guilt, where the Black community will make white people feel like, white privilege, where they'll make them feel like, they should handle themselves in a certain way because, they have all of this quote unquote white privilege, and basically guilting people into feeling bad about who they are naturally. And then doing this to young kids it's bullying. She said she felt political pressure to transition too. The community was very social justice-y. There was a lot of negativity around being a cis heterosexual white girl, and I took those messages really personally. Chloe Cole, a 17-year-old student in California, had a similar experience when she joined Instagram at 11. I started being exposed to a lot of alphabet content and activism, she said. I saw how trans people online got an overwhelming amount of support, and the amount of praise they were getting really spoke to me because at the time, I didn't really have a lot of friends of my own. And that's Helena Kirshner. Experts worry that many young people seeking to transition are doing so without a proper mental health evaluation. Well, duh. Among them is Dr. Erica Anderson, a clinical psychologist specializing in gender, sexuality, and identity. I mean, how could they be getting a proper mental evaluation when they're only being seen 1 to 3 times tops, and they're freaking 9 to 12 years old, and they're being bullied, or they've been exposed to sexual activity, and they're being sexually abused, and they have all of this stuff going on, and they have a doctor in front of them that they trust, because their parents brought them there. And so as a kid, it's like, I have no reason not to trust you. And this person is telling you, oh, I know the solution to your problem. You're gender dysphoric. And what we're going to do is we're going to make you the opposite gender, and it'll solve everything. I have no sense of reasoning myself. I'm a child. So this adult is telling me this will solve my problems. Okay. And then not only that, I have the whole community behind them saying, yeah, this is what you do. Do it. We all support you. Why the heck wouldn't I want to do that? Among them is Dr. Erica Anderson, a clinical psychologist specializing in gender, sexuality, and identity. A transgender woman herself, Anderson has helped hundreds of young people navigate the transition journey over the past 30 years. Anderson supports the methodical, milestone-filled process lasting anywhere from a few months to several years to undergo transition. And that is exactly how it should be. Take your time. These changes are irreversible. Why are we rushing it? Today, however, she's worried that some young people are being medicalized without proper restraint or oversight. Yeah, absolutely. They're throwing these drugs at these kids, and they're like, hey, you'll figure it out. And then the moment that they, are unhappy and they come back to the doctor, oh, I can't help you. What? I'm concerned that the rise of detransitioners is reflective of some young people who have progressed through their journey very, very quickly, she said. She worries that some doctors may be defaulting to medicalization as a remedy for other personal or mental factors. When other issues important to a child are not fully addressed before transition, then medical professionals are failing children. That is the understatement of this whole presentation. But yes, honey, they are failing children. Absolutely. According to an online survey of detransitioners conducted by Dr. Lisa Littman last year, 40% said their gender dysphoria was caused by a mental health condition, and 62% felt medical professionals did not investigate whether trauma was a factor in their transition decisions. Crazy. My dysphoria collided with my general depression issues and body image issues, Helena recalled. I just came to the conclusion I was born in the wrong body and all my problems in life would be solved if I transitioned. I don't know why that picture is so big, but it's weird. That's the doctor. Chloe had a similar experience because my body didn't match beauty ideals. I started to wonder if there was something wrong with me. I thought I wasn't pretty enough to be a girl, so I'd be better off as a boy. Deep inside, I wanted to be pretty all along, but that's something I kept suppressed. She agrees with Dr. Anderson that more psychological evaluation is needed to determine whether underlying medical, I keep saying medical instead of mental, underlying mental health issues might be influencing the desire to transition. More attention needs to be paid to psychotherapy, Chloe says. We're immediately jumping into irreversible medical treatments when we could be focusing on empowering these children not to hate their bodies. Exactly. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. Just give them, show them how to love themselves. Show them that these things are irreversible. You were born in this gender, and that is who you are. You have to learn to love yourself. That's it. Until 2019, Marcus Evans was the clinical director of adult and adolescent services at the Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust, a publicly funded mental health center in the UK, where many youth seek treatment for gender dysphoria. But he resigned 3 years ago over what he viewed as the unnecessary medicalization of dysphoric adolescents. Well, good. At least somebody sees the problem and does something about it. Unfortunately, you resigned, so you can't help these kids. I saw children being fast-tracked into medical solutions for psychological problems. And when children get on the medical conveyor belt, they don't get off, Evans said. But the English, man. English is the devil. But the politicization of the issue was shutting down proper clinical rigor. That meant quiet. Does that say quiet? Whatever. Vulnerable kids were in danger of being put on a medical path for treatment that they may well regret. Indeed, transitions are getting younger and hastier. Puberty blockers are commonly administered at the first sign of development to children as young as 9. Ugh, that breaks my heart. According to the World Professional Association for Trans People's Health, testosterone and estrogen injections are frequently prescribed at age 13 or 14, despite the Endocrine Society's recommendation of 16. And serious surgeries like mastectomies are sometimes performed on children as young as 13. That should be illegal. I mean, think about it. A 13-year-old kid can't go into a store and buy cough medicine these days. You have to be 18 to buy cough medicine. But they can go and quote unquote consent to having body parts lobbed off. And then isn't informed consent when you tell someone of all the possibilities that are going to happen as a result of this procedure? Because clearly they're not doing that. They're not telling them that there's a possibility that their gender identity might change. They're not telling them that there's a possibility that they might want to transition in a couple years. They're not telling them that this might not actually solve your problem. They're actually making it seem like this is going to be the fix for everything that they're feeling and that they're never going to be unhappy again. Although medical intervention for minors requires parental consent, many mothers and fathers approve surgery and hormone therapy at the recommendation of affirming medical professionals, or even out of fear their child might self-harm if denied treatment, which again goes back to what I said earlier. This is what they're being told. These parents, because I mean, any parent, this is not going to be their first choice for their child. However, if they think that their child is going to harm themselves if they don't get this, then they're going to be more motivated to let it happen. It's very hard for parents to know exactly how to evaluate their own kids, and they rely quite heavily on experts to tell them, said Jane Wheeler, a former regulatory healthcare attorney who founded Rethink Identity Medicine Ethics, a nonprofit that promotes ethical, evidence-based care and treatment for dysphoric children. There's obviously a lot of concern about the capacity for the adolescent or minor to fully appreciate what medicalization really means. Medical professionals typically follow the affirmative care model, which is supported by the American Psychological Association, validating a patient's expressed gender identity regardless of their age. As a result, detransitioners frequently report that getting prescriptions is a breeze. A total of 55% said their medical evaluations felt inadequate, according to Dr. Littman's survey. Right. Of course it was inadequate. You barely had any medical evaluation. In Helena's case, it took to get a testosterone prescription was one trip to Planned Parenthood when she was 18. She said she was given 4 times the typical starting dose by a nurse practitioner in less than an hour without even seeing a doctor. God, how is that? How is that legal? She didn't even see a doctor? Goodness gracious. Chloe said she was fast-tracked through the entire transition, from blockers to a mastectomy, in just 2 years with parental consent. The only pushback she said she encountered came from the first endocrinologist she saw, who agreed to prescribe her puberty blockers, but not testosterone, when she was 13. But she said she went to another doctor who gave her the prescription with no trouble. And that's how easy it is. Because all the therapists and specialists followed the affirmative care model, there wasn't a lot of gatekeeping through the whole transition process, she recalled. The professionals all seemed to push medical transition. So I thought it was the only path for me to be happy. Evans, the author of Therapeutic Model for Working with Children, Adolescents, and Young Adults, now runs his own private practice with his wife in Beckenham, England, where he helps parents struggling with how to address their children's dysphoria. A variety of studies suggest as many as 80% of dysphoric children could ultimately experience dissonance or coming to terms with their biological gender without resorting to transition, which is why many professionals, like Evans, think it's wise to hold off on potentially irreversible medical intervention for as long as possible. I'm not against transition. I just don't think kids can give informed consent, which is what I just said. They can't. They can't. They can't sign contracts that are legally binding, so why would they be able to give consent to have body parts chopped off? All of these treatments run the risk of side effects that critics argue are too serious for children to fully understand. In the short term, puberty blockers can stunt growth and affect bone density, while the long-term effects are still unknown since they were only approved by the FDA in 1993. Side effects of testosterone include high cholesterol, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, blood clots, and even infertility. Currently, just 3 states, which this is no longer true, but it says currently just 3 states, Arkansas, Arizona, and Texas, have policies limiting gender-affirming treatment for minors, including surgery, hormones, and speech therapy. But that's not true. This was last year. As of today, The states that restrict gender affirming care are Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, Florida, Mississippi, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Utah. And there are still 23 other states considering introducing bills to restrict gender affirming care. So it's getting better. People are opening their eyes a bit to this crazy situation, but we're not there yet. We're definitely not out of the woods quite yet. For those who ultimately end up regretting their transition, the consequences of hormone therapy and surgery can be devastating. For Helena, testosterone caused emotional instability that culminated with 2 hospitalizations for self-harm. So she had the gender affirming care and she still felt like she wanted to hurt herself because they're not addressing her mental issues. While in the hospital, she came to the realization that her transition was a mistake. I saw a montage of photos of me, and when I saw how much my face changed and how unhappy I looked, I realized this was all effed up. I shouldn't have done it. It was a really dark time. Chloe said testosterone altered her bone structure permanently, sharpening her jawline and broadening her shoulders. That's never going to go back. She said she also struggles with increased body hair and facial hair, has a large scar across her chest from her mastectomy, which disturbed her about surgery. The recovery was a very graphic process, and it was definitely something I wasn't prepared for, she said. I couldn't even bear to look at myself sometimes. It would make me nauseous. Because she was a kid. She was 15 when she had a double mastectomy. Of course, she couldn't stand it. Gravest of all concerns is her fertility. Although she'd like to have children one day, Chloe doesn't know whether the viability of her eggs was compromised for years by testosterone injections. She's working with doctors to find out, and her medical future is uncertain. I'm still in the dark about the overall picture of my health right now, she said. The subject of detransition is often met with vitriol from the trans people activist community, which claims that stories like Chloe's and Helena's will be used to discredit the trans movement as a whole. It's understandable, although unlikely, as research reveals that up to 86% of trans adults feels like transitioning was the right long-term decision for them. But as more and more children are entrusted to make serious medical decisions with permanent implications, the number of dissatisfied detransitioners is almost certain to grow. And the fact that they are fast tracking these kids to, have these affirming medications or procedures also guarantees that the number of detransitioners is going to grow. That's why Dr. Anderson feels compelled to speak out on their behalf as a transgender woman herself. Some of my colleagues are worried that conversation about detransitioners is going to be more cannon fodder in the culture wars. But my concern is that if we don't address these problems, we will be even more ammunition to criticize the appropriate work that I and other colleagues are doing. And like Anderson, these young people who will forever live with the consequences of hasty transition refuse to be silenced. I want my voice to be heard, said Chloe. I don't want history to repeat itself, and I can't let this happen to other kids. Which is admirable. At least she's trying to turn a negative into a positive. At least she is trying to make a difference in this community, which obviously failed her. The whole trans movement, how they get these kids to choose to go ahead with this quote unquote affirming care, it's like an echo chamber. You go in there and they just make it seem like everything is just going to be so good after. You'll have nothing to worry about. Doctors never pushed other options, and of course they make them think that suicide is the going to be the result if they don't go ahead with the procedure. So mad I missed that video. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys Chloe's story. Don't worry, this one's not as long as the first one.
And I'm an 18-year-old detransitioner from the Central Valley of California. I started socially transitioning and identifying as transgender when I was 12 years old.
Okay, I'm gonna start it over. Start it over for me. It's thinking.
My name is Chloe Cole, and I'm an 18-year-old detransitioner from the Central Valley of California. I started socially transitioning and identifying as transgender when I was 12 years old, and I was fast-tracked onto medicalization at 13, starting with puberty blockers and testosterone, before I went on to get a mastectomy at 15, and I stopped transitioning at 16 when I realized that I had regretted my transition and that it was starting to cause me emotional and also physical harm. People often blame my parents and they say like they should have known better and that I should be suing them right now, but I think they're victims just as much as I am. My parents actually had pushed back on me medically transitioning at first, but the team of the medical professionals that helped me to push me really to transition never presented any other options. They said that the rate of regret is less than 1 or 2%, and they even lied to my parents that I would be at risk of suicide were I not allowed to transition. My medical transition lasted for about 3.5 years, and during that period of time, there was really only one doctor who pushed back on it, and that was the first endocrinologist who I saw in order to get hormones. He told me and my mom that there would be risks for my brain development, but immediately after, I was just referred to another endocrinologist, and after only about 6 months of being diagnosed with dysphoria, I was placed on puberty blockers and then testosterone a month or so after that. I had been sexually assaulted in my 8th grade year, and that prompted me to start hiding that area of my body. I mean, I didn't even recognize it as sexual assault, and I didn't realize how much it really had affected me. But I bought my first binder about a week after that happened. I would work out in this thing. I would go swimming in it even, and I got sick of it pretty quick. I wanted to be free of it, and I wanted to be able to go out without a shirt, without having these things that I didn't want on my chest. And in my sophomore year, that was when I really started to consider surgery, and I brought this up to my my therapist, and I was referred to a gender specialist before being referred to a surgeon. I had been diagnosed with social anxiety and depression, and my mental state was rapidly declining, and my grades were really starting to suffer. And somehow this wasn't considered when I went to surgery. I was 15 years old. It was far too easy for me to go through this. It was only about half a year between being referred to that surgeon and actually going under the knife. After I had to get the stitches taken out and I had to start doing my dressings, that is when reality started to hit. Every single night, after every bath, after every shower, I would have to look down at these huge wounds. I mean, I was told that this would be part of the process, but you don't really understand just how much of a toll it will take on you until you go through it. It's certainly not for kids. No 15-year-old girl should have to go through that. eventually I started to realize that I missed little things about being a girl. Sometimes when nobody was home, I would put on makeup or wear some of my old girl clothes. But I was ashamed of it, and I never told anybody about it. But I kept struggling with these feelings, and I continued to get worse. I had to eventually drop out of school and go into an alternative program, in which I was taking a psychology class. And there was one lesson that was about parenting, maternity, and the development of a child into teenhood. One of the most important parts of the lesson that really stood out to me was breastfeeding and how important physical affection, um, excuse me, how that bond is important to the emotional and cognitive development of a child and how they function later in social situations. I mean, before that, I never really thought about being a parent or breastfeeding. During one of the consultations for my surgery, I was told that I would lose my ability to breastfeed, but at this time, this didn't mean anything to me because I didn't know anything about that. I wasn't even thinking about being a parent because I was 15 years old. I had just completed my sophomore year. There was no way that I would have been able to really understand what that meant. It was then that I realized that something beautiful and uniquely female was taken away from me forever. And I was perfectly healthy before that. I was only a kid. I really didn't get any help with detransitioning. I basically just did it all on my own, and I never got any guidance. I stopped taking testosterone cold turkey, and I experienced some complications from that. My gender specialist who referred me to the surgery really was at a loss of what to do with me. And I've talked to my surgeon. I've reported that I regret my surgery and that I'm having complications with it years afterward. And his response was, "Okay, just put some Vaseline on it. that'll that'll fix things." But it actually temporarily made it worse. And that was really the last straw. I feel like now I can't depend on my healthcare provider or many doctors at all. I don't think the biggest problem with my transition was that I regretted it. What's more damaging was that they lied to me and my parents. They coerced my parents into allowing me to do this. They withheld a lot of information from us. But even then, at the age I was, I just wasn't capable of giving informed consent. And it's seriously affected both my mental and physical health. I'm still recovering to this day. I don't know if I'll be able to conceive a child or safely carry to term, and I certainly won't be able to breastfeed. And the people that did this to me need to be held accountable.
Yeah, I agree. They should be held accountable. They should be doing prison time. They cut into a young child. And yeah, they can hide behind informed consent, but we all know that it really wasn't informed. So I have a few more testimonies. I'm just gonna kind of summarize for you. So, Kat is another woman who she medically transitioned. She took testosterone. She never got the actual procedure, but she was a singer before she decided to medically transition to be a male. And she, I believe that she also was sexually abused in some way, and that was what caused her to want to go down that road. And how she was able to attain the testosterone was she had a 30-minute phone call with a doctor whom she never met in person, and they prescribed testosterone for her. Now, at the time, she told this doctor that she is a singer and that she wanted a low dose of testosterone because logically she just knew that it was going to affect her voice. And she later found out that she was not given a low dose and that there were plenty of other people who had gotten half of what she was given. And unfortunately, now her voice has been affected to the point that she really can't sing how she used to. She has pain a lot of times when she tries to sing. I think since she's gotten off the testosterone that the pain has lessened, but her voice is never the same and it never will be the same at this point. And she was actually a little older when she went through her process. And that's the scary part, is that if they're able to bamboozle whole adults, imagine how this hits a child. You know, Chloe just said in her story that she was sexually abused, sexually assaulted. You know, let me not misquote her, but she said she was sexually assaulted and that made her want to kind of get out of her own skin, which is normal. You know, it's a hard thing to deal with when you're abused in that way because you can't get out of your own skin, you know, and you have to look at yourself and you have to kind of keep reliving those things constantly. And what she needed, as I keep saying, is she needed a therapist. She needed to be able to talk about it and work through those feelings. Okay, so I have maybe 2 more videos to show you guys. This one here I think is pretty important. It's a bunch of like, okay, so first of all, let me just start with the picture that they show here. So this is the gender map. It shows all the gender clinics within our country. And as you can see, there are a lot. Let me get to this one. This one has the legend on it telling you what each color means. So orange is a pediatric surgeon. Purple is a pediatric gender clinic. Light purple is 16 to 18 gender clinic. So obviously they can go there and get like the medications and stuff, but they can't actually get the surgery. Blue is informed consent. So that's where they go to, you know, say that they want to have these surgeries. Red is testimony, which I don't really know what that one means, if I'm being honest. But let me get back to the full map. And you see there's a lot of dark blues, which were gender clinics, a lot of light blues, which are 16 to 18 gender clinics, a couple of the oranges, which were the surgeons. And I really truly feel like somebody should go into all of those offices and arrest those doctors because it's freaking ridiculous. But this one is, it just a bunch of people talking about their experience trying to detransition and how they saw such a stark change from when they were transitioning to be, you know, to change their gender versus when they decided to detransition to go back to their assigned gender.
Come home in the morning light, my mother says, when you gonna live your life right? Oh, mother dear, we're not the fortunate ones, and girls, they wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna have fun. The phone rings in the middle of the night. My father yells, what you gonna do with your life? Oh, daddy dear, you know you're still number one. But girls, they wanna have fun. Oh, girl. girls just wanna have fun. That's all they really want. Is some fun. When the working day is done, oh girls, they wanna have fun. They wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna have fun. Some boys take a beautiful girl and hide her away from the rest of the world. I wanna be the one to walk in the sun, and girls, they wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna have fun. That's all they really want. Some fun. When the working day is done, oh girls, they wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna have fun. They just wanna, 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 just wanna.
So some of those you might have to, when you get a moment, pause and read or what have you. But you know, at the end, it was. At the end, it was. They said that detransitioners aren't as rare as you think. They're just silenced, which was pretty much what I said, right? I don't know how to make this go away. Oh, I just saw your comment, Jeff. It says, I don't think blaming any one specific forum is fair. Satan works through whatever or however he can to convince someone to follow him. It could be anything. She just got caught on Tumblr. Yeah, and that's the scariest part when I was watching her video was how many other kids you saw doing it and teaching the next one how to do it. There's all these videos of how to do your injections and how to care for your surgical scars or what have you, and it just blew my mind. It's just really sad that this is our world. It's just really sad that this is what our kids have to deal with. And I have this open, but I don't know where it is now. So I just have one last thing I want to show you guys. If I could find it. Is that it? I think it's this one. So this is what this is what these kids are signing up for. This is what they are consenting to. And when you see it, you can't really unsee it.
Well, here's the procedure.
So, I don't know if he's gonna say it, but yeah, this is the actual procedure of a man being turned into a woman.
Open the sack, cut the nuts out. Those are gone. See ya. Then they cut around the head, like slightly take the head off. They're allowing teenage boys to do this to themselves, you guys. Or, I'm sorry, teenage girls to do this to themselves. Can you imagine mutating your body like this at 12 years old, 13 years old? I'm so glad my hair didn't stay green from when I dyed it when I was 12. They connect it down to the anus. Imagine doing all this and then wanting to go back and switch. Can you imagine that? These poor kids, man.
I mean, that's the hardest part. He said it, right? Like, how do you do all of this to your body and then want to go back? There is no going back. They can't make that right again. And then think about the guy in the first documentary we watched that, you know, he did it and then he wanted to go back. And how? Like, what's left? I just feel if something isn't done soon, I mean, we're already going to Hades in a handbasket, in my opinion. And at this point, I'm afraid for our kids. I'm afraid for our future generations. You know, it just seems like it's only getting worse as time goes on. So I thank you all for coming out and riding with me. It's been a little rough, but it was my first time on my own. So thank you for your patience. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, please do me the honor and hit the subscribe button. And if you forgot to hit that like when you came in, please do me the honor and go ahead and hit that like. So I'm pretty likable. And I'll see you next time. That is all I have tonight.